Hello everyone, this is David Oakham from Oakham Arts Games, and welcome to Episode 2, The History of Darkfast. Now, before I started playing role-playing games, there were plenty of things that I was passionate about. And all of these things influenced and informed my biases about what my first Dungeons & Dragons campaign would become. My gaming group had already played Gamma World, so our tastes were already a little gonzo. We've had a lot of adventures already, and I'd read a lot about Dungeons & Dragons. D&D seemed a bit old-fashioned when we started playing it, even back in 1981. But when my aunt got it for me that Christmas, I was very excited to start playing the original fantasy role-playing game for 3 or more adults, aged 10 and up. Where did the world of Darkfast come from? I mean, to be fair, it's a pretty vanilla fantasy setting. The name itself, though, can be found in Issue 5 of Pegasus by Judges Guild from 1981. In this issue, there's an epic city-state campaign adventure called The Quest for the Silver Empress by Clayton Miner. There, on page 43, is an illustration by Ken Simpson of Sylvania Darkfast, a lawful neutral first-level fighter and barmaid. Also listed is her wistful father, Kilburton Darkfast. When I read this originally in 1982, those two characters really leapt off the page and lived in my imagination. With these characters, I figured out a whole backstory of family secrets, a necromancer, a lich, and political intrigue. As I created my campaign setting for my D&D campaign, I was more concerned with having fun on Friday nights with my friends than coherent backstory. This began to change as I connected the game to my existing Champions campaign. In one crossover, I had an evil sorcerer show up in Champions and AD&D. Making stats for both the same character in 2 very different game systems was a game design eye-opener. The city of Avalon in the Kingdom of Richard became the default setting for all of my adventures. It was insanely detailed, right down to menus of various taverns. As I fleshed out the city, I was greatly influenced by the Thieves Guild series, the Haven books, and the Robert Asprin Thieves World setting. I was drawing insanely detailed maps and isometric drawings depicting this city, finely tuning it every time I drew it. I switched over the game to Hero when Fantasy Hero was released in 1984, and then the second edition came out in 1990. I started tweaking the character races, and my orcs and ogres and goblins began to mimic the minis I was collecting from Citadel Games Workshop. I think I was inspired as well by the Palladium setting and the changes they made with goblins, orcs, and bugbears. It was in a way to put a personal stamp on what was starting to feel like a more limited setting with an unlimited game system. By the late 90s, I all but stopped playing fantasy as a genre and focused on gothic horror and superheroes. The 3rd edition of Dungeons & Dragons was a bit of a puzzle. I couldn't make heads or tails of the system. It seemed overly crunchy, and this is coming from someone playing Champions. Years later, I was working on a How to Draw manga book, and I pulled out all of my notes and binders. I'd modified my own game world and made a new map. I renamed the setting The Kingdoms, and suddenly felt inspired to run a fantasy game again. The resurgence of the old-school gaming renaissance with the simplified D20 system, with a move back to old-style winging it, was a heartening shift in what seemed to be a rules-lawyer's world of gaming. People who hadn't been playing for years were playing role-playing games again. I sat down and came up with a short and sweet game system designed for quick pickup games. It was deliberately old-school, and I named it Darkfast Dungeons. We also used Microlight 20, Basic D&D, and Labyrinth Lord, but I liked how my paper minis were allowing me to quickly recreate the look and feel of my old gaming sessions. started detailing the adventure setting, and before I knew it, I was working on a real print-and-play board game. I included nods to all my campaign heroes, including my first character, the Wizard Scrife. Combining paper minis with paper terrain just unleashed my imagination, and the setting felt much less generic and vanilla. It started to feel like a real place, as one adventure led to the next. Heck, I even had pig-nosed orcs and scaly puppy boy kobolds. Funky kobolds aside, the setting was getting a bit big for its britches. I'd made 11 Darkfast paper mini-sets and a Ducks class book for Labyrinth Lord in less than 3 years. I launched the Darkfast Dungeons Kickstarter in 2014 as a way to launch a print-and-play game quickly and help me focus on a fairly daunting task. The game had been in playtest mode one way or another since I created Space Station Decay in the year 2000. Over 14 years of testing came together to create a fast-playing pick-up dungeon crawl game that could allow 2 to 3 sessions in a night. The game also allowed for excellent solo play. As I was working on the expansion sets, I already had a rich backstory to dig into, courtesy of all those years of gaming. I was able to experiment with my own tiles, cardstock dungeon terrain, and print-and-play props. Once again, it was nice to see all of the old influences such as classic D&D and RuneQuest influence the game, most notably ducks as playable characters. Today, as the rest of the Kickstarter is finishing up, I'm completing a trio of adventures for Darkfast and Swords and Wizardry. The Kingdom of Richard Gazetteer provides bonus material in the setting for the Ghostwoods adventure, and the upcoming Bugbear's Crown is set during a civil war in Assarite. It's been fun revisiting old adventures that I ran in the 80s and 90s. Running them again for playtest with my friends has been enlightening for the players, as they're happily playing the adventure once more and having little recall about the original adventure from over 25 years ago. I wonder if that's a good thing or a bad thing. The main amount of fun has been fleshing out the setting and exploring new corners of this old world. Next up, a role-playing game dedicated to Darkfast Dungeons to provide campaign rules and more options for playing in the setting. It's been really fun sharing this world that was inside my head with all of you, and I can't wait for the next Darkfast release. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.